Welcome to Security Weekly Virtual Hacker Summer Camp 2020. I am your host, Matt Alderman. Joining me for this segment, a very good friend, Corey Bodzin, who's the Chief Technology Officer at deepwatch. Corey, welcome back to Security Weekly.
Hey, thanks for having me again. It's always fun to get together, Matt.
It is. I was just counting. The last 5 companies you've worked for are either previous or current sponsors. I can only thank you for deepwatch, but that's okay. For people who don't know, Corey and I have a long history of working together at Qualys and Tenable and RSA and back and forth. I came here and you've gone a couple other places, so congratulations on the new gig over at deepwatch.
Yeah, thank you. It's a lot of fun, and I figured I needed to get a C title so I could keep up with you. But I am looking forward to that day when we get to work together again.
Absolutely. We're going to talk about LensScore, which is a new. It's a benchmarking tool, I think, right, for SecOps maturity. Give us an overview, kind of the concept behind LensScore, and then I want to get into what's LensScore going to help organizations do.
I'm pretty excited to talk about it. Deepwatch LensScore is our first product offering actually here at Deepwatch. And it came about, we're an MDR services company. We spent a lot of time talking to CISOs. And what we often heard from CISOs, they were always asking the same 3 questions. They wanted to know, what's the current state? What's the maturity of my SecOps organization? Don't just give it to me in a vacuum, but tell me how that compares to my chosen peer group, be it my industry, in my vertical or similar size. And then, because, time is precious for all of us, but probably triply so for CISOs, don't just give me a list of the 500 things that I could do. Give me the one best recommendation about what I should do to improve my effectiveness. And we heard that so often, and we thought, you know what? We had this maturity model that we were used to working with our customers on, and we're in the midst of patenting our maturity model version 2 that brings a real scientific way to measure, are you collecting all the right data? Are you using all the right analytics? Do you have the appropriate coverage throughout your environment? We thought that we needed a way to surface that maturity score, surface industry benchmarks, surface recommendations in a really friendly, easy-to-use way. And that was what drove us to create the Deepwatch LensScore product.
Now, we've done this in other industries in our past. ClearPoint Metrics, Lumen. There's been other attempts to do this. And one of the challenges has always been, how taking the results and really giving a good set of recommendations and getting value out of these maturity models and these benchmarking products, right? And so what kind of thoughts went into really making this valuable for those people that are going to participate and use this type of tool?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. I've been in a bunch of companies where we've tried to do this, and we talked a lot about the notion of how do we actually make this useful and what's missing from scores. And there are a lot of good products out there. I like Lumen Cyber Exposure Score. Full disclosure, Tenable's a partner of ours. I like companies like Security Scorecard and BitSight, the folks at RiskLens. But what they all do is they all kind of give you here's a score, and it's hard to put together why you have that score. It's hard to understand what you can do to affect that score. And even when you get information about here are things you could do, they tend to be more generic kind of recommendations of, CASB is really good for you. And maybe it's true if you're an all cloud company, but in a manufacturing, there may be an awful lot of on-prem where maybe CASB is not the best recommendation. And so those are some of the things, first, we'd wanted to capture our maturity model. Our maturity model is reasonably sophisticated. The math has actually passed me. Once they got into logistic algorithms, I hung up my hat. But it does incorporate a variety of factors, and it weights them according to context. And context is something that we uniquely have with our customers. We're embedded with their SecOps team. We understand their environment. We understand their business drivers. And so for our customers, we're able to pull in all sorts of context to say, you have a maturity score of 5 on a scale of 1 to 10. But it's not just, hey, 5's bad, you should be up to 6, you should be up to 7. We can say instead, 5 is actually roughly where your peer groups land. It's roughly what we would expect. Or, here's a gap that we know we have. And if you were able to add this particular data source, maybe give us your Microsoft Active Directory log so that we can see credential misuse, maybe evidence of lateral movement, something like that. Maybe instead of adding a technology, we say, look, you've got cyber reason for your EDR. It's fantastic. You're only 10% deployed. If you could get up to 20% deployed, it would bump your score up considerably. And it's maybe lower effort because you already know how to do it. It's just a matter of rolling out more. That context and being able to turn that into those concise recommendations of here's the most impactful thing you could do takes into account not just how good the technology may be, but what it means to you, what it means to your business, and really reflects some of the idea of the level of effort. That's where we think we get to be really unique. And we're not trying to solve, for the whole set of security, maybe someday. But right now, we're very targeted on SecOps and your SOX maturity level. And so in that context, we have a unique vantage point in the industry and with our customers to really make effective recommendations and help, share some knowledge and best practices.
Yeah, I think you bring up two very valid points that I think has been a struggle when we've tried to do this in the past in other markets. Context is a big portion of this, right? We talk about this from a risk perspective all the time. You need context, right? You need to understand the environment. You need to understand criticality of assets, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is what I think slowed a lot of things down in the vulnerability management space when we've attempted to do this in the past. And sometimes when people try to add context, Corey, they limit it to a handful of things that you can configure. But context is more complex than that. So how have you thought about what are the different elements that come into context that really drive the math behind the algorithms?
Yeah, that's a great question. And context is really hard. The notion of what your assets are and what's important to you is something I've actually talked about throughout my career. And when we were together at Tenable, one of the things I heard at one of our customer advisory boards, I'll never forget, made an impact on me. We had a major auto manufacturer was talking. We were talking about how do you decide what your important assets are? And we were going down this path of, the systems that control your production or your supplier chain is really critical. And she had raised her hand and she said, in our country, the unions we have really rigorous rules. And so actually, one of the most critical systems we have are our commissary payment processing systems. Because if our workers can't get lunch because we can't take a credit card, our factory shuts down because they're allowed to go home. And that's the kind of thing you don't find by just pulling technical data. You don't get that information by talking at a high level about, our data centers and our servers. You actually have to be talking to the practitioners, the business owners who really understand what drives their business. And that's something we capture at deepwatch. When we talk with customers, we understand those nuances about, it looks like this might be critical. Here's what really makes our business hum. And then our algorithm is able to adjust for that notion of the importance of those assets, the impact to the business, what the effectiveness of controls would be. And something like, a point of sale unit for a commissary, you don't want to make a recommendation about you should have an EDR agent on there. It's probably not feasible. That's probably a case where we really want to get some good logging flowing into the SIM. So those are some of the things we try to account for. And I'd be lying if we said we had all that, but that's we started with the maturity score a while back. We're just patenting version 2. We have plans, I joke with my team about, we're going to incorporate that into version 3, version 10, version 719. So we really expect to grow this as we get feedback, as we get more data, and as we really hear from people, here are the attributes we want to catch. And here are the things that really provide that useful context.
Yeah, we had Doug Hubbard on Business Security Weekly Tuesday night, and he was talking about, look, no algorithm is perfect. What you have to do is minimize uncertainties, which means you're going to iterate through this algorithm multiple times over, to your point, to 719, because you're going to find another element that reduces the amount of uncertainty in your scores, and therefore you're going to incorporate that and make those measurements even better.
That's right, and we have, hopefully our viewers will try logging in. We'll get to the tagline on that later, but in our deepwatch Lens Score product, there are areas where we provide very specific discrete values. There are a lot of areas where we fall back to ranges or simply high, medium, low, and that we do that to reflect that level of uncertainty. And as Hubbard said, I think it was in How to Measure Anything, or maybe it was in How to Measure Anything in Security. Any bit of data you get that helps you make better decisions is good, even if it's not precise. And that's something we've really taken into account in our algorithm. We tried, and in our presentation, is to make sure we're giving you information that helps you make better decisions. We'll keep refining it to help even pinpoint those decisions more.
Now, the second point I want to get on is the actionability of the results, right? This is the big thing that's always kind of limited us in our past, which is, okay, let's assume I have enough context to prioritize. It's really, how do I then take that prioritized list and make it actionable? So to walk me through some of those different action steps. You score the environment. Now I have to make it actionable for me to really figure out how to improve my maturity from one step to the next. It's that actionability. So how do you really accomplish that well with what's happening in Lens Score?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So there are 3 key components to the score I talked about. I'm going to take them in reverse order. The first one that we have a direct ability to provide action on is asset coverage. Great example, Cyber Reason and an EDR partner of ours. We have customers who want to deploy it, and we know what percentage of their environment they've got deployed against. And it's very easy to come up with an action plan of increasing that percentage, of increasing the coverage, and also knowing, by the way, where you stop. But 100% might not make any sense. You might be able to get plenty of visibility and the capabilities you need covering 50% or 70%. So we start there with asset coverage, or that's one of the components. We also have a notion of our use case analytics. That's actually what we do with the data we collect. And when we onboard customers of varying maturity levels, sometimes customers are not ready for us to turn on all of those analytics. Maybe they're not in a position to take action on them. Maybe it requires very specific tuning to make sure that the signal to noise ratio is appropriate. And those are the kind of things that often happen during onboarding. You make certain decisions that you want to revisit, but memories and busyness being what they are, it doesn't always come back. So we make that a really important part of the recommendations of the algorithm as well, is, hey, you're giving us all the data we need to detect things like lateral movement, but some of these analytics we had turned off because we needed to tune it. So our number one recommendation to you is, let's sit down with one of our detection engineers and do the tuning. Those are 2 areas where we have some really key insights just from our day-to-day operations with our customers. Then another really important point is actually having the data, having the technologies and the capabilities. And this is where we have great partners like GuidePoint, and we have great experience, right? We can say things like, we know, we fully adopted a Beyond Corp model here. We think that MFA is a really important capability, and it adds a lot to customer SecOps maturity. We don't, we're fine if you want to use RSA or if you want to use Duo. And we don't make any recommendation on the technology, but we do have partners who can help and guide. And GuidePoint is a great example. They bring a lot of expertise to the table. Of in your industry, we've seen that this product's been a really good fit financially, from a deployment standpoint, et cetera. So we can seamlessly do that handoff to say, if you really do want this 1 or 2 point increase in maturity score, here are the people who can help you understand what it'll cost, what the level of effort is, can even bring a team to help you make it so. And that's really where, to your point, you and I think, both worked at Qualys when Ann Johnson was there, and she said something great that has always stuck with me, right, about a customer saying, you've told me the 100 things I should go fix or the 10,000 things I should go fix, and I hope you sleep well tonight. We tried to be really deliberate on this, of not just saying, here's the 100 things you should do, but actually here's the plan to do it, so that you can do one and, as a CISO, really sleep well that night.
If people, how long does it take to fill out the questionnaire to give you that? If a CISO is going to go log in, how long should they kind of set aside to actually get through it?
Yeah, so when I joined deepwatch, I used the thought experiment of, suppose we're at Black Hat, we're going to have 1,000 people walk up to the booth. How do we make sure that in 90 seconds they've got value? We're obviously all still at home, but virtually that's still the target we've gone for. So our initial release of Deepwatch Lens Score, the notion is we model, is tabletop modeling. We load a set of defaults based on what we know about various industry profiles. And so within 15 seconds of logging in, you've got a score and you've got recommendations. Now, you'll then want to go and tune it to what your exact environment looks like. And that doesn't take that long, to be honest. It can be done in a couple of minutes, where you can model out, I think I have these technologies, I have these capabilities. We make some assumptions for people who are not customers of ours about coverage and use case analytics. And within a few minutes, you've got what we call a potential score. It's where we think we could be with the level of information that we have. Now, if you want to get a more exact score, your actual score, we have a call to action in the product. Our team will reach out to you, and then we'll go through a deeper dive. That still only takes an hour, couple of hours, depending on how thorough you want to be, how large your environment is, where we'll ask some questions about your infrastructure, your cloud usage, things like that. But anybody should, within a few minutes, be able to get an idea of where they're at, and within a couple hours of chatting, know exactly where they're at and what they should do next.
That's great. Corey, thank you so much for joining us on Security Weekly. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I'm looking forward to a day when we can both get on a plane and have a beer, or in this case, a sake together.
Yes, absolutely. Anybody who wants to log in and get their maturity score, please visit deepwatch.com/lens-score. And with that, we'll take a short break and come back with more interviews from Virtual Hacker Summer Camp.